Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Women Entrepreneurs Global podcast, Mindset for Success, where we're going to explore tonight the unconscious struggles that female entrepreneurs have had to conquer in order to be successful. I'm your host, Dr. Leslie Knutson, and I'm so excited to meet and hear from our guest today, LUCIA Gallardo. She is truly a leader in the community of women empowering our global future women entrepreneurs. And she has also, in her own words, been working on social justice since she was 8 years old. LUCIA has a very successful career as a Honduran serial entrepreneur, and she's the founder of Emerge and Tabic, the latter being a community for young entrepreneurs in Latin America. Her latest endeavor is to co-chair the International Advisory Council at Women's Entrepreneurs Global and to lead Women's Global Exponential Technology Division, which I think is further proof of her commitment to promoting women's business and a career advancement. So please join me in welcoming our distinguished guest, LUCIA Gallardo.
Thank you so much for having me.
LUCIA, as you know, it takes a lot to be a successful female entrepreneur, and business acumen is, of course, a critical ingredient. But we rarely talk about the psychological challenges that women often face to achieve that success. And I refer to them as the unconscious struggles that create doubt and undermine success and can destroy self-confidence. So I wonder, LUCIA, if you can tell me what made you want to become a serial entrepreneur, and in particular in the world of technology and social inclusion in Latin America, where women are often underrepresented. And I can imagine that your choice to undertake an entrepreneurial journey may have come partially out of your long-term dedication to social justice. However, I imagine it could have also come with some risk for you.
Absolutely. I think, it was inevitable that I would end up an entrepreneur, especially a social entrepreneur, as you sort of know a little bit about my commitment to social issues. But I think for me, it wasn't necessarily that I said, I want to be an entrepreneur, or I want to build a company, or I have a product in mind. For me, it was really this obsession with solving problems that led me down this path. And that started, when I was 8, and I sort of started slowly, realizing what was going on around me as I was growing up in Honduras and experiencing, firsthand natural disasters, and also a lot of the visual inequalities that had become now apparent, and I didn't understand them. And so in a quest to try to understand them and see if there was anything I could do to help, then that sort of turned me on into this world of at least like project management. I didn't know at the time that it would turn into a company or anything like that. But, I think over time it was just this commitment to understanding what the issues around poverty and generational poverty and wealth inequality and lack of access to basic services like water or education. I really wanted to understand all of these things. And so to me, it was, and still to this day, I consider that you can learn to be an entrepreneur. You can learn the business components. You can learn all of these other factors. But in what you call the intangibles, I think for me, a lot of entrepreneurship is really about sort of emphasizing what those traits are within you. And so if you are, a naturally problem-driven or problem-solving person, if you are a collaborative person, if you're very driven, all of these traits, they sort of get amplified when you choose to learn to become an entrepreneur. And so I find it really fascinating that the two come together, and the outcome potentially can be something, really innovative or very positive for the world. So it's very much like my entire life led me here.
Right. In fact, what I was going to say, it's not like you're really thinking outside the box per se. You're just following what has been instinctively the direction that you've always had, which means that there's a certain amount of confidence about doing what you're doing. And I kind of wonder how, I mean, have there been some days in which, or dark periods in which that confidence hasn't been there? And if you can tell us a little bit about that,
Sure.
Because of course it's sometimes up and down.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think by any means that I would consider myself a confident person per se. I struggle with it a lot. But I do know, I think a bit of that is understanding that everyone has sources of confidence and sources of, the opposite of let's call it inconfidence for now. But essentially, I tried to understand what those sources of confidence in me were. And I'm very confident about my way of seeing the world. I'm very confident in my ability to empathize and to problem solve in a way that's both, creative and innovative, but also humane and very empathetic. And so I know that those are areas where I do feel like I'm really strong. And then every other area probably maybe less so. But so, when I do go through these periods, and there are so many because, you're constantly trying to build something, and even if you have gotten really good at turning the noise down and not comparing yourself to other entrepreneurial journeys, the world tries to push that on you. And they say like, oh, well, why aren't you making, consistent revenue, and why aren't you at this stage or that stage? And why haven't you hired a right hand already? And what, and so they're analyzing all of your decisions. And so obviously it could be really terrifying at times to say, do I have it together? I don't know. What am I building? Is that, what am I doing wrong? Is this why this is not working? And so I think there are so many ways in which doubt can sort of come to your mind that I have found it really helpful throughout time to remind myself of the things I do have really strong confidence in. And then even if in that moment, that's not the type of confidence I need, reminding myself that there is a foundation for me being strong and me having all these areas of strength. It helps me sort of climb out of that negativity and try to figure out ways to problem solve because I'm a good problem solver and I know that, right? So I've just found it really, really helpful to understand myself to the degree where I know what my foundational areas of confidence are. And even if there's not that many, or it feels like there aren't that many, that when I really need to feel positive about myself in a different area of my life where I'm not feeling necessarily so confident, then I know that I can resort back and adjust the scenario so that it taps into this area of fortitude. And so I would hope that, all women and all people really are able to find those little areas of real confidence where they say, you know what, I am good at this. And sometimes that's what you need in order to pull yourself out of that like funk, I guess they call it.
And how could you share with our young listeners who are out there and kind of considering going into being an entrepreneur, how could you share with them how you are able to really evaluate and take stock in the confidence that you have? What allows that to become real for you?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that humans have a natural tendency to assume they know themselves because you are yourself, right? So you just think, I'm me, so I know myself. But actually, I think the most powerful and empowering thing that we can do for ourselves is to know that, one, we don't know ourselves, unless we are active and intentional about it. And two, I think the other bit of it is that we change constantly. And sometimes things happen to us, good and bad, that adjust our way of seeing life, that adjust the ways that we process things, that adjust our priorities in life. And so we need to be really careful and intentional about sort of processing all of those moments and how it makes us different humans as we grow up and mature and change and so on and so forth. So I think the best advice I could impart, and that it took me a really long time to learn, was, when you're learning, and you decide that you're going to learn about a topic you didn't know about, the first step that you need to do is figure out how you're going to learn it. Is it, are you going to take a course on it? Are you going to YouTube it? What are you going to do? Are you going to read a book about it? And so you need to find these ways and apply them to yourself. So for me, when I said, okay, I need to learn about myself, I started by reading a couple of books on, building self-awareness and on, designing sort of your goals and your objectives and things like that. And then I started applying a lot of those techniques that I was applying in my work when I was trying to build a product or trying to solve a problem. I started applying them internally. So I started saying, okay, well, I'm going to mind map. I'm going to try mind mapping because I know that's a very powerful thing. When I'm trying to problem solve, I break down all these different problems and learn more about them. And so I said, okay, so what are the key pillars of my life? And I said, it's, work and family and friends and my personal curiosity and what I want to learn about the world, my mental and physical health. And so I broke all of those down and tried to figure out where I stood. And then I started doing this more regularly. I would do it maybe like 5 or 6 times before setting any kind of resolution for the new year, before setting any kind of major goals. And the more that I sort of got to know myself through these processes, the more I discovered what those areas of strength are and what those areas where I needed to work on were. And so I know, I learned that even though I'm, let's say, a very generous person, I lack a little bit of discipline. So I need to be very intentional about channeling, a bit of generosity into the, time and effort that I put into building discipline. And so in learning, for example, that famous resolution of I'm going to go to the gym 5 times a week. Right. But we do that because, it's an expectation that we're like, you should be healthy. And so you should go to the gym and, whatever. And a lot of times that's not why we want to go to the gym. Right. We want to go to the gym for a specific reason. It might be to lose weight, sure. But actually, in my case, it was because I wanted to build strength. I wanted to feel like a strong woman. And so going to the gym and running on a treadmill wasn't going to make me feel strong, which is why I wasn't sticking to that habit. But when I would do activities like boxing or like Krav Maga that would make me feel really strong, I'd be very consistent because it was tapping into this real me that I wasn't even aware about had I not taken the time to learn about myself. So I think the advice is, we, as the way that we apply learning and the way that we sort of look at the world externally, we can also put those practices in to ourselves and be generous with ourselves. And so it's really helpful to build that awareness.
I think that's helpful, just trying to make things concrete and not overwhelming and break them up into little pieces.
Yeah, totally. And sometimes you don't have the bandwidth to like go through all of those things. Sometimes I would only look at mental or physical health, or sometimes I would only look at work because that's all I had bandwidth for. But over time, and the more that you practice, the better you get at just knowing yourself. And then once you have these like areas of self-awareness, then areas that might be your gap areas or that you might want to work on, or maybe you don't want to work on them at all and just find people that can fill that gap for you, or maybe it's something that you realize is actually a very big strength of yours, and then that's what you resort to when you are feeling like it's a down moment.
Let me kind of switch it up a little bit and ask you, have you noticed in your work as an entrepreneur what you feel is a mindset that is a mindset strength among men and perhaps a weakness among women? And have you dealt with that in your own sort of personal interactions, business interaction?
Yeah, I think there's like 2 things that have particularly stood out for me in relation to when I'm actually aware that there's a difference between genders. One of them is this, like the entire strategy around pricing. I think women really struggle to find the right pricing strategies as entrepreneurs. We often undersell ourselves. We often undersell our products and our companies. And I think men struggle less to do that. And it might be a confidence thing. Maybe it's, a direct experience with pricing things in previous professional roles or something. But there definitely is, and I've made this mistake often. I've underpriced myself significantly, and I still struggle with it. Actually, a couple of days ago, I had a phone call with a friend who said, wait, how much are you charging for your consulting? And I gave her the number, and she said, you need to multiply that by 4. That's what I would expect to pay for you. And I said, by 4? That's insane. I don't see myself charging by 4, multiplied by 4. I'd feel guilty about it. And I think that's something that we really need to lean into, is understanding, how to price ourselves with a lot more confidence, because it actually backfires. Like, being the cheapest option might make you seem like you're less quality of a consultant or less quality of anything. And so I think in this way, it's definitely been an area where it's obvious that there's a disparity. And I think that women need to start getting a little bit stronger, and myself included. I'm definitely preaching to myself here and saying,
finances can be so difficult for women for all the things you talked about.
Oh my God, yes.
You feeling greedy, feeling like you're not worth it, and being even kind of ashamed to ask for too much, and
absolutely.
So